Good afternoon, everyone. Today, my presentation is on diamond babies, reclaiming Africa's narrative. I firmly believe I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. This is a poem by Thabo Mbeki that defined me as a young African, growing up from two different Ugandan cultures. My father is a South Sudanese who settled in West Nile. My mother is a lady from the hills of Buheju. Two very different cultures that raised me, and my parents named me Patience Kiden Naamanya. A strategic move to make sure that I could navigate the different narratives society had about my two cultures. In some places, I am Patience Naamanya, and in others, I am Patience Kiden. But growing up with these two different contrasting cultures and being raised in 4 different African countries left me with a cultural identity crisis. I didn't know what it truly meant to be Ugandan, because according to some of my relatives, I didn't tick the boxes that needed to be ticked to be either a Kuku or a Munyankole. And so I grew up with an identity crisis, asking myself, what did it mean to be Ugandan? Was it the fluency in which I spoke my mother tongue? Was it in the way I could cook a local delicacy? Was it in me having a memory growing up in a rural village? Did that really make me Ugandan? But also the fact that I was in schools of different cultures, with teachers of different cultures, I also asked myself, what did it mean to be African? Was I African? Was I Ugandan? Who was I? And it's in that question that you also ask a deeper question. When did you realize you were African? For many of us, you grow up listening to stories about how your family originated from a certain clan, or your grandparents fought against colonialists, right? Or for many of us young women, you look forward to your traditional marriage, a celebration of your rich culture where you wear all sorts of beaded attire and celebrate truly being a woman of your clan. Well, for me, I realized I was African in 2 defining moments. One was watching Thabo Mbeki present that poem on TV, and 2 was when me and my family went to a restaurant and there was a placard that said, "Do not let your children run around or they will be sold as slaves." That was a defining moment where I understood that the poem made me empowered to be African, but that placard made me, I can't really define it. It was a stinging feeling, but I knew I was those people they were talking about. My father, a professor of economics, had 2 passions. He's very passionate till this day about 2 things: education as a tool for empowerment and his half-African heritage. He raised us to understand the importance of African unity. Contrast to my mom, who raised us to understand the importance of being a Munyankole. Okay? And my father's stories often centered around understanding Africa, understanding why the war in Sudan was caused by contrasting cultures, understanding that we were the ones to solve the problem in Congo. We were the ones to shape the future of Africa. That's what he told me and my siblings. But that requires a certain form of ownership. It requires you to believe that for you to shape something, to innovate anything, you must believe that you can create something out of it. And I didn't know if I was actually African or how I was African, because there was a lot influencing my perception of myself. Today, I stand here with more clarity on how I am as an African. And this has been shaped by several different scenarios. As a 90s baby, we grew up on television, seeing stories about Africa being ravaged by war, Africa being ravaged by diseases, but most importantly, how African cultures continue to undermine our social economic progress. However, today, with the rise of social media, we see different stories about Africa, and the narrative of Africa is changing. We have headlines like Africa is rising, Africa is the next center of economic progress. But that does not really reflect our frontline communities. And I can say this confidently because I'm a development professional who has centered my work working with refugee communities in remote settlements. I've empowered over 1,600 women entrepreneurs from 30 regions in Uganda. I have mentored over 300 young women to take on public leadership roles in their communities. But still, those headlines are not reflected in frontline communities. And I have learned that narratives shape policy, and somehow our policies do not reflect the vision we want for Africa. Today, I represent African community stories in rooms where I translate their experiences into global policy dialogue. What does that mean? I tell the rest of the world what people on the front line need to shape their vision. I no longer only just represent Africa. I'm not defined as being a girl from Buheju or being a girl from West Nile. I'm an African young change maker who's representing the voices of frontline communities, who is saying that young Africans are ready to redefine our narrative. And I think we can redefine our narrative by looking beyond our cultural demarcations, by looking at political groups beyond our cultural allegiances, and seeing that our diversity as Africans is actually what should unite us. Because when you go on social media and see social media hashtags like EndSARS, Congo is bleeding, or the Gen Z movement in Kenya, we all resonate with these hashtags in different ways. Why? Because of the spirit of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is something that has been ingrained in so many African cultures, over 3,000 of them. And it says, I am because we are. If I have translated it properly, but I do believe that is, I am because we are. And as much as it's present in 3,000 of our different cultures, in 54 of our African countries, do you see Ubuntu reflected in our governance structures? I don't think so. Because if Ubuntu was reflected in our African cultures, we'd see unity and transparency, and we would see structures that enable Africa's greatest resource, our youth, who I choose to call diamond babies, having a platform to take ownership and reform our narrative. And I know you're all wondering, why would I call our youth diamond babies? I'll get to that later. Right now, we are a generation that has somehow in our own way merged culture and socio-economic progress. And we see this in the exportation of Afrobeats to Europe. We see African tie and dye frontlining New York Fashion Week. And we see young African innovators leading fintech innovation that actually helps poor communities. That is a recipe for the progress of Africa. Because if we really believe in creating the Africa we want by 2063, if we really believe we are the ones, where are the structures to create it? In February 2025, the Botswanan government signed a deal with De Beers, a deal that renewed Botswana's mining license and also developed a diamond development center for the community. A very historical deal for Botswana, a very historical deal for Africa. Who was leading this? She's called Mrs. Joy Kenewendo, the current Minister of Minerals in Botswana, a self-proclaimed diamond baby. She attributes her education to a government policy in Botswana that gave rural communities funds to put their children in school. She reclaimed her narrative coming from a village in Botswana and is now leading the merger of agreements that redefine Botswana's future. We as Ugandans are at a critical point in history where we have the tools to create platforms for diamond babies like Joy in Uganda. We have those diamond babies in this room. My question for you all today is, when January comes, how are you going to ensure that we create systems that enable the next generation of Ugandan leaders who will take ownership of our hills, our valleys, our mountains, and the glades, and deliver the Africa we want by 2060?